from there to Fort Worth, Texas, with Johnny Roselli in the car. I was well aware that Johnny Roselli was involved in the government actions. He was like the liaison between CIA and organized crime, and he was heavily involved in the invasion of Cuba, Bay of Pigs, Chianos Bay, whichever you prefer to call it. But he was also very tight with Frank Sturgis. Frank Sturgis headed up the SAO, which is the secret army organization, what this is all about. And they've had so many different code names for wanting to kill Castro, I couldn't even name half of them. But every time you turned around, somebody had a new operation going. I didn't know where we were going to Fort Worth. He's told me, and he had directions, and I don't know if he'd ever been there before or not. But we went through Fort Worth. I remember the exit was, we got, well, that wasn't an exit really, it's like University Avenue or University Boulevard. The name University, that's all I know. And I know it was on the south side, and then it stood on the west side of that street. Just a couple blocks off, and there was a pancake house. Fairly new one.
It was still there?
No, I didn't know it was still there, but it's been there long. I guess they made good pancakes, I know that. But that's where I had my first Belgian waffle. But that morning when I got there, Johnny Roselli went there to meet somebody by the name of Jack Ruby. I had never knew Jack Ruby, nothing about him. When I got there and pulled into the parking lot, Johnny Roselli told me, he said, let me go in first, see where I'm going to sit, come in, position your stuff. And he asked me, he said, are you carrying? And I said, yeah, I'm carrying. He says, good. He says, when I sit down where I'm sitting at, he said, I don't know what may transpire. He said, something could go wrong. He said, but be very alert. He said, keep my backside covered. He said, I won't be in your line of fire. And I said, okay, I'll pick up open field of fire. I says, wherever I figure I can handle it. I said, I'll go sit down, I'll come in position myself. Johnny Roselli went in and they had like, you call it a booth at the table sitting there, you know, it wasn't bolted to the floor or nothing. But he sat down in that, and I went in shortly right behind him. I positioned myself at the counter, ordered a cup of coffee, was served, and sit there. And then I sit there and I watched until short, stocky-built man come in, walked over, Johnny got up, they shook hands, they sit down, they talked for a couple of minutes. I seen him take like a half size, like a legal envelope, but only half that size, out of his jacket, and he pushed it across the table to Johnny Roselli. He got up, they shook hands, this man left, Johnny waited maybe 2 minutes, Johnny looked at me, I got up, I walked out of the restaurant, made sure the area's clear, nobody outside in the parking lot. I went over, got in the car, started up, I pulled up by the door, Johnny Roselli walked out, got in the car, and we drove away.
Did you ask him, or did you find out in some way what was in the envelope?
On the way back to Dallas, Johnny and me was riding down the road. He didn't open the envelope right away. We got almost, I think it's Arlington. It's about halfway there. I'm saying halfway. It could be less one way or the other. Been a long time for me. But we was right about Arlington. And Johnny opened the envelope up, started taking stuff out and looking at it. Excuse me. He's looking at it. I'm noticing over. I'm watching over while I'm driving. And he's got these little black wallets, like half-sided, like identification wallets. And he opened them up, and there's identification plates on them, and there's badges on them. At that point, I didn't know what the identification on it was, because he's sitting there looking at it, and I'm not going to lead over. I'm not going to say, give me one of those or anything like that. I'll wait. When they want me to know, he'll tell me. And then he opened up a piece of paper, and he unfolded it. And there's been a lot of discrepancy over this part now. But Johnny Roselli said they only made one change in the route. And it was a map of Dealey Plaza, the motorcade route. When he looked at it for Dealey Plaza, he said they've only made one alter, one change in it. He said, that's all. And I said, what's that? And he said, they're going to go down Elm Street. So they're going to stop and make a detour, come around this little street here. And he held it up, and I kind of glanced over at it, but I didn't get a chance to look at it real good at that point. But I already had reconned the area, so I knew what he was talking about.
On that particular morning, what happened was I came downtown and I thought there was going to be a parade. So what I did was I parked my vehicle back here in this parking lot, and I intentionally walked to this particular corner because I wanted to take pictures of the parade off of the railroad bridge. Well, this is about as far as I got, because what happened is when I got my leg to about this position, a man came around the corner off the bridge, had a suit on, and he turned around and he told me that I wasn't going to be there. And I guess I was younger and more spunky at that time because I told him, you and who else is going to keep me off the bridge? And he pulled out an identification card and he said, I'm with the CIA. And I said, well, that's enough muscle. I'll leave. So I turned around and brought my leg back over like this. I walked down the fence line here about halfway. And I was looking over the fence to see if I could get a good shot of the parade. And he come back up and he told me, he says, I told you to get out of this area. And I said, okay. So I walked the complete length of the fence, got around on the other side. That's when I started to line up my frame so that I could take the picture of the parade. I had been panning shots through here so that I could get whatever was going to come down the street. And I saw that it was the President of the United States. And as I was panning down this direction, just as I got to about this position, a shot came right past my left ear. And that meant it would have had to come from this direction. And that's when I fell down. And to me it seemed like a second shot was at least fired over my head. There's a bunch of report going on in this particular area at that time. And what happened was that while I was laying on the ground, it seemed like a gentleman came from this particular direction. And I thought it was a police officer because he had a uniform of a police officer. But he didn't wear a hat. And he had dirty hands. But it didn't really...
Of what happened to President Kennedy. They didn't tell us the truth.
It's a very valid criticism of the Warren Commission that it failed to follow up many, many important leads and witnesses that came to its attention. One of the best examples, I think, is the fake Secret Service man up on the Grassy knoll and a Dallas police officer. Within a minute or two after the shooting, Officer Joe Marshall Smith ran up on the Grassy knoll following the other witnesses. That's where they all went initially. And Joe Smith pulled his pistol when he spotted a man behind the picket fence up on the Grassy knoll. This was a man dressed in coat and tie. And this man, even looking right into Smith's revolver, said, hey, I'm Secret Service. And he pulled out some credentials that to Officer Smith indicated that this man was legitimate. Smith left him alone and went away, investigating other areas in the plaza. The important part is that the Secret Service at no time had any agents anywhere in Dealey Plaza, with the exception of the agents who were riding in the motorcade. So here's a guy passing himself off as a Secret Service agent to a Dallas police officer, and there was no Secret Service agent here. The Warren Commission either didn't know that or didn't want to know. They didn't even ask Officer Smith pertinent questions about that encounter. And to me, that's one of the great failings of the Warren Commission, and a typical example how important evidence was overlooked initially or lost at that time. There was some new evidence that came out in late 1976, evidence that I was responsible for, in that the researchers had long been aware of recordings of the Dallas Police Department's radio channels. The department was using 2 at that time. And some interference began just a couple minutes before the assassination occurred, and that interference continued for 5 minutes or so after the assassination, and it effectively blocked all police communications on their main channel. What wasn't known was which officer was responsible for it. My thinking was that if the officer were in or very close to Dealey Plaza, his open microphone may have picked up the sound of the shots. From that theory sprang an investigation by the House Assassinations Committee, and after some digging they found what they thought were the original recordings. They had the scientists analyze the recordings and decided that after some tests and then firing some test shots in Dealey Plaza and recording those, that there were 4 shots fired during the assassination, perhaps as many as 6. And that, of course, proved conspiracy.